Hey there, everybody. Thanks for joining me for another one-man review. Today, we'll be doing the obligatory evangelizing about how much I love Shinichi Sakamoto. We've got a new volume of a Shinichi Sakamoto book out, and so, of course, I'm going to share it. This is his series Innocent, which is coming out through Dark Horse in these wonderful omnibus collections. Sakamoto's work is something, if you've been following the channel, you know I've been a big fan of him the whole time and really hoping to see his work translated finally, especially my favorite of his, The Climber, which is the one that hasn't been translated yet. But his other works are stellar, and Innocent is a hell of a project, probably more ambitious overall than any of his other stuff that I've seen so far. So we get in this some of his like cover work for the single volumes. You can see like his painterly approach, and that painterly approach really kind of applies to how he does his black and white art as well, where he's almost getting so fine with his line work and all of the textures and stuff that he does that it almost starts to look like pencil drawing more than anything else. And like Dark Horse is doing a really fantastic job. I mean, these are all images that are being drawn and created digitally, so Dark Horse has like perfect assets to work with, and they're doing a fantastic job of catching the infinitesimal details that Sakamoto's putting into his art. I hope that this series sells well enough that eventually it gets like a hardcover deluxe treatment like Berserk, because I think this artwork, his artwork, any of his series, kind of really deserves to be seen in greater fidelity at higher resolution, bigger images. But right out the gate, you see some of the kind of imagery that Shinichi creates that's so interesting. One of the things I like about him is even though his work is largely focused on being pretty realistic within the boundaries of like having the manga style applied to the faces, he's willing to go really surreal as well and work with very metaphoric imagery in all of his books. So here you have this gigantic creature created out of like the populace, this gigantic monster that is the king. King is Leviathan, basically the authority that's been given the power by the people, and here it's just eating the people. You can see this face constructed out of the people with the bloody teeth. It's really cool imagery. And then there's this whole, basically the opening of the book, the first 100 some odd pages is all just a super slow display of someone being drawn and quartered, because the book is about Charles Sanson and his family, who are the executioners during the French Revolution. And so the king has ordered in this sequence, he's ordered a drawing and quartering to really make an example of a person. And in the story, these are all historical figures, but Shinichi Sakamoto like just makes up a lot of details. In the story, Charles Sanson is a lover, or someone who has a love interest in this character who's being tortured. So he wants to do it like as kindly as possible. And that's kind of the arc of Innocent, is the arc of Charles Sanson trying to lead to a world with more humane execution, so the development of the guillotine, and then a world free of execution eventually. And one of the things that I love so much about what Shinichi's doing in this book is he's always juxtaposing the really beautiful aspects of French society at that time, the extremely romantic, flowery, like Palace of Versailles type of imagery, versus like the utter brutality of what was going on in their executions and whatnot. So you'll get these images like this that look like they're out of a romance manga book, a shoujo book, and then you'll get an image like this of this guy just being absolutely torn apart by these horses, his limbs getting stretched out, his body's already been abused by putting hot glass on it. And I mean, the torture started and took up a good chunk of the first volume, so he's really leaning into these brutal things, but balancing that out against like the beautiful decadence of the society. And he's making big political points with it too. Like here we have Charles' younger sister Marie, and Charles is a begrudging executioner, but Marie's kind of like the family protege that loves it and wants to do it and just sees it as this beautiful art form. And you can see here as a little girl, just like watching her brother do this drawing and quartering, really loving it. And as Innocent goes on, it becomes an exploration of the liberal values of the revolution, and also pointing out, where they went wrong by not giving women as much freedoms as they should. And eventually the series goes on to focus more on Marie. So there's like a cool arc between Innocent and Innocent Rouge. Some more of this really cool metaphorical imagery here. As the guy's dying, you start to get these like shrinking rhythmic little stained glass window images here with like this stairway to heaven, so representing like the interior religious experience the character's having. And then again, juxtaposing all that against these super vicious, brutal images of like someone's body being ripped apart. At the same time, you have Charles Sanson playing a violin, and here you have his fingers bleeding from the strings and one of the strings breaking to show, like a metaphoric, like the sinews snapping in the body. And then just absolute brutal imagery there. And I could flip to pretty much any page of this book, and all throughout the book you have these just stunning compositions throughout, these beautiful images on every page. I get that for some people, like an image like this is obviously pretty much just a photograph that they've adjusted. And I do think that's why The Climber is my favorite, because he was working all analog in there. I think for the most part, Schinichi does an amazing job taking his things that are purely just manipulated photographs and doing enough to them that they usually look like drawings, that they fit, and he's able to create the type of imagery that he wants within his book, to tell the story and get it out on time. So I don't begrudge him that. But I do think sometimes it gets a little too photographic, and I get why people, aren't so into those type of images. But I think overall, in Innocent, more than the hashtag DRCL, he's doing a good job of keeping it pretty drawing looking. It integrates with the drawing well. So we're 130 pages into the second volume, and the torture had already taken up some of the first volume. And we get this little bit here that says, on March 28th, 1757, an hour and a half after the start of Francois Damien's quartering, it was declared complete with one leg still attached. According to accounts, he was still conscious for several minutes after his leg was pulled off. Then his dismembered corpse was tossed into an adjacent pyre. So, you really get a sense of how long and brutal this was, and how brutal this society was, and the spectacle all of it. And I appreciate so much about manga that they'll be willing to take 250 pages. I mean, you're running this out in once a month or something like that. You're dragging readers on for a year just on this torture scene, and I like that they're willing to do that. They're really leaning into the psychological factors. Here you get a premonition of the fact that Charles Sanson is making friends with a German named Julius Schmidt. He was a man living in Paris at the time, and they're kind of tying this idea of the broken string into the violin as well, of the way they could have this guillotine on the string up there. They're saying Julius Schmidt was an instrument repairman. His son Tobias Schmidt would later create the guillotine at the behest of Charles. So even though this is a definitely exaggerated, fictionalized, characters made up, doing things that didn't happen in actual history, it's leaning on actual history and presenting actual facts here and there. So that makes the story more compelling and makes the thematics in it more intense. Some of what you see in the story is also just the pressures of a family that has a legacy trade. So you have this family of executioners where not only do they carry a social stain because they're seen as these harbingers of death, but then the family itself has a certain amount of brutality built into how it works. So here you see the grandmother, I believe, maybe the mother, I think it's the grandmother Sanson at this point, though, is torturing Charles's younger sister, Marie, and basically telling her women are not people. Without men, they have a paltry existence with less value than livestock. How dare you think you could be a professional executioner? So he's exploring, the hypocrisies within the political situation at the time, not actually being as fully liberal as it suggested, and also providing a lot of really cool character development for Marie later on. This is one of those images where I think Shinichi and his two assistants, from what I've seen, they're producing this all just with three people. They didn't go far enough in this one to like turn it into a drawing for me. So I will say, like in Innocent and the hashtag DRCL, there are some images like this where it pretty much just looks like a halftone photograph, and they haven't done any real drawing on top of it. Maybe doing some effects and stuff to make it more magical looking. So every now and then you'll get images like this, and I get why people are turned off by that. But the majority of the time, even though those tricks are being used to get the fabrics and things like that, I think when I look at an image like this, it still feels pretty much like a drawing, even though I know how they got to it. And I think it's just that Shinichi is the type of person that would be willing to draw this if he had the time, but he's getting these works out on schedule. I mean, if someone actually took the time to draw this, he'd still be working on the first volume of Innocent. We wouldn't be onto a whole nother series already. So I don't begrudge him that. And I think out of all the people that kind of mix the digital and the photographic and have like a collage digital drawing kind of approach, I think Shinichi Sakamoto is one of the absolute masters of it. And you get these crazy images like this. Here you get another one of these metaphoric sequences where Marie has been sent off now to this older guy, this wealthy guy, and he's basically has the keys to give her the job she needs to get, but he's gonna rape her to do that, to get her that favor. And so you see that whole sequence playing out here where you don't see Marie, he's just sitting here making out with this like mannequin doll creature and showing like the dissociated mental state she's in, as well as like how he's viewing her as just an object. And again, creating a lot of really great character motivation for her later on, because she's actually going to get a chance to execute this guy. And so he's such a masterful writer as well as a masterful artist that these are just like stellar comics all the way through. Shinichi Sakamoto is a real beast of a comics maker. Also, we get to get introduced to many like very famous people from the same time. So you see Mozart here becomes a character in it. You get to learn about like some of his family. A lot of other characters, historical characters, show up in an interesting way. We get a pretty good time jump here where now Marie is older, and I think she's 13 or 14, and she's getting to do her first execution, and it happens to be the man who's raped her. You can see here that like it's not historically accurate in the character designs or anything like that. It's definitely stylized where she's got like the shaved sides of her head and almost this big mohawk mane of hair. But Marie Sanson throughout the Innocent and Innocent Rouge series becomes a really cool badass character that's really easy to root for. And here, like where she's getting to actually do her first execution with this man who raped her, it's a pretty good like Game of Thrones level comeback scene type of thing. We also start to balance out Marie Sanson's story with Marie Antoinette's story. There's kind of like these parallel lines, well, not parallel, but parallel paths that at some point do like converge. And for that side of the story, that's where Shinichi Sakamoto really gets to lean into the beautiful Palace of Versailles, like romantic, rococo-looking imagery like this. Again, some use of like some photo manipulations for rugs and whatnot, but I still personally think that he's doing a good enough job in general of integrating it and making it look like a drawing that I still love looking at images like this. And the areas where he is drawing, he's going so ridiculously fine and small. It's just absolutely gorgeous to watch. This is Madame du Barry, who's making her entrance as a character. Again, another really famous historical figure, someone who goes on to become the mistress of King Louis XV. Another really cool visual sequence here where Charles Sanson is being seduced by Madame du Barry and having what I think is his first sexual experience, and it starts to get pretty psychedelic. You see like the pattern of the tile in the church that they're in starts to just become this like almost hallucinatory pattern mapping over all of reality. So there's some things like that even if Shinichi Sakamoto took the time to actually hand draw it out, I would imagine you would probably need some kind of computerized aspect in there anyways to help you figure out an image like this. How would that, or you'd have to project that pattern. So I think he's using the computer stuff to create images that would be extremely difficult to create otherwise. Here's another example from that sequence where you have now the patterns totally broken up and becoming like three-dimensional space that he's navigating, that he's drowning under. You've got like the ecstasy of Saint Teresa. So it's all being managed in a way that's creating images that wouldn't be impossible to create otherwise, but there's no way you could keep a regular schedule and create images that complex and imaginative and beautiful. And sequences like this is just part, but beyond like the beauty of the drawing, pure delicate beauty of his drawings, it's his imagination for imagery that really captures me. Something else that's cool that I guess because I read this online, because it wasn't translated yet. Years ago, I read this online. I didn't realize that he was doing pages where it's a 2-page spread that's flipped like this, which I don't know that I've ever seen in a manga before, or very, very rarely. This seems like a mid-90s American thing to me. So that's really interesting to me that he really wants to get this composition. This is another reason why I would love to see these in big deluxe, where we're not getting gutter loss. It actually can fold out. To see this one, I was just so in love with this image here. I actually bent the book a little bit and, am risky breaking the glue on the spine. So images like this, I think, just deserve that. And it's pretty cool. It also shows me that Sakamoto Schinichi has a bit of like a European in him. I think that's pretty obvious in his interests. The like classics of European art and composition are obviously baked into his interests here as but the point is I see someone who's an artist. Like each panel, each image to him is like its own complete composition, its own complete painting, its own complete drawing. And like this one needed to be big like that in his mind, and it needed to be vertical, and it needed to have like the compositional qualities of the paintings that would be back here in one of these houses. And I really, really appreciate that about him. And I do hope that he gets popular enough that he'll get the treatment his work deserves, which is to be collected in the nicest format possible and treated like a true pieces of art. Because I believe that's what this artist is aspiring to. That's what this creator is aspiring to. I think that's the mission statement that he made in The Climber, is someone who's aiming to climb the tallest mountain and be a master. And everything he's done since then is the work of a master and deserves to be treated that way. We also, in this volume, meet Louis the 16th to be as a young child. Here is another one of these just absolutely stunning images. This is a great example of one where they've obviously used like a photograph of a field as the ground for this, but there's so much drawing going on top of it, and manipulation of the images and erasures and hand-drawn leaves over top of it and details and hatching that it becomes a drawn image. And this is just some of the most beautiful nature imagery I've seen, other than maybe like Barry Windsor Smith, who's actually nutty enough to go draw it all. And these kind of the way that ambiance and lighting and weather and stuff is captured is really inspiring to me as well. The idea of digitally composting things is influencing me quite a bit. You meet Louis the 15th here. This is him here, and again, you're seeing these beautiful like Palace of Versailles moments. This is all like, yeah, there's some photography in here, but it's all got drawing on top of it, and just these beautiful characters all throughout. It's just nutty to look at, absolutely gorgeous all the way through. And then at the very end of this volume, a couple times throughout this volume, Marie said something like, like this is awful or something like that. And reading it online, I remember that she had this mantra that kind of became her catchphrase, where she said, "This sucks." And I was really bummed because I thought they were translating it differently in this volume, because there's a couple of times where she says something else similar. But at the end of this volume, you get her saying "this sucks," and that made me really happy, because she's going to repeat that throughout the rest of Innocent and many, many times throughout Innocent Rouge as well. And that was one of my favorite parts of that character. And again, one of the playful things that Shinichi Sakamoto does that keeps his work fun is, like, obviously someone in that time in France wasn't saying this sucks. Obviously she didn't have a haircut like that. Obviously this king character didn't have like Harlequin paint on his face in this design every time people saw him. But he understands like what's making a compelling story, what's making recognizable characters and all of that. And he's just making a good, fun read that's based in reality, but like based in a real situation, but not terribly grounded in it. But at the end of all of it, he does have this like educational material, notes on what's going on in the 3 sections in the book, who the people were, and so he is grounding it in all the actual research for you so that you can like see, oh yeah, like actually that sword she has did have these holes in it, you know, this is what it actually looked like. So he's willing to educate you on where he is making these obviously playful, entertaining type of decisions, like having Marie Sanson say this sucks and what's actual historical fact. So I think this is a really cool feature of these omnibus volumes as well. So really cannot recommend more. Out of all the comics coming out that I say I'd recommend, the Shinichi Sakamoto ones are like the imperative recommendations. Please go buy this stuff. Please make this a successful series. Because I really think, A, we deserve even bigger, badder versions of these, and I would totally double dip. I would donate these to someone and buy the hardcovers. I'd pay for it twice, and really, like, enjoying these on the way to getting the Climber is, I think, something well worth it. Like, that's such a great book, and these are such great books. But the Climber's like top 2, top 3 comics of all time for me. So yeah, get yourself some Shinichi Sakamoto. He's a real true modern master of the medium.
Back to the land.